Hi everyone, welcome into this week's My Weekly CBS Fix. Hope you had a wonderful week. In this week's Parsha Shmos, starting the second of the 5 books of Moses. So Moses comes and he starts to talk to the people about the fact that they're going to be free, and they have their audience with Paro, and Moses does some miracles in front of them. There's a whole back and forth between Pharaoh and Moses. Pharaoh's like, who's God that I should listen to his voice to let the Jewish people go? And finally Pharaoh's had enough, and he says, you know what, guys, just increase the workload on the Jewish people. Tichbad ha'avoda al anashim, increase the workload, and v'yasu, but let them do that. Val yasu, val yishu b'divrei sheker. Don't let them play around with this idle chatter, with idle talk. That means just get them so busy and so just overwork them and overload them with work. And like that, they'll stop their idle chatter. Now, a lesson that we can learn from Paro's speech is Paro was trying to enslave the Jewish people, and the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, tries to enslave us. How does he do that? He does that by telling us that we should be so busy at work. We're so busy at work that we won't have time to think about the important things of life. And we'll just be so, and sometimes we see that like Hashem can make somebody so busy that they don't have time to think. And they're just that busy and they're making that so much money. But we have to know sometimes it's not necessarily a blessing, because they're so busy that they don't have time to study Torah, they don't have time to build a family, they don't have time to do anything. Some people aren't so busy at work, but some people are so busy doing sins and they're following their sinful ways that they don't have time to take stock of the life that they're doing either, and they never have time for regret. You know, sometimes you'll be at work and sometimes you'll be very, very bored. And what happens when you're very bored? You find things to do, and it usually ends up being the wrong things to do. And then you'll find a different job and you'll be very busy there that you actually won't have time for sins. Or sometimes you'll be at the same job, and if it gets really busy, you won't have time to do sins either. So that's the way of the Yetzer Hara. The Yetzer Hara wants us to be so busy, but sometimes too busy that we'll either do sins, or that we'll be so busy that even if we're not sinning, we'll actually be still so involved that we won't actually be able to live and be able to build that family and be able to learn Torah. And that's the same enslavement mentality that the Yetzer Hara has for us. Just like Paro said, that we should just be so busy, not think. So the Yetzer Hara sometimes makes people so busy that they don't think. And our job in this world is to think. Just want to share one small idea with you. The Jewish people are promised that they should go to a land filled with milk and honey. And the question is, what's the expression milk and honey? It could have said wine and olive oil, which is one of the 7 species of the land of Israel. One of the other species over there. Why milk and honey? And the answer is given that milk and honey are both items that come from a non-kosher source. Milk, the Talmud explains to us, actually comes from the animal's blood or a mother's blood, and then the blood turns into milk. And blood is forbidden to us. And also honey comes from the bee. So what does that mean? What that means is that when we go to Israel, even if a person's source is non-kosher, nevertheless, somehow the land of Israel has that way of making people who are not kosher into kosher people. We have this expression called Avir D'Eretz Yisrael Machim, Avir Da'ara Machim. The airspace of Israel makes a person wiser. Maybe that's why there's so much wonderful Torah that's being taught in Israel, and there's so many people that are their journey in life through coming closer to Hashem is by getting up and going to Israel. That even though they may have come from an impure source or an impure background, nevertheless they go to Israel and they're able to purify themselves and come back to be true leaders and true B'nai Torah, people who stand for Torah and love Torah, and they have now utilized their entire time to actually focus in Israel and to be able to be B'nai Torah. Have a great Shabbos. Thank you for listening. Talk to you next week.